I feel very excited and privileged if you're with me, so thanks so much for joining. My handle is at Meg Eat Beautiful, so please follow along if you'd like to. I'd love to have you. I will be here every Wednesday after Trad Cook School's Periscope with Wardy at 10:30 or 10:30-ish if hers goes a little longer. So I will look forward to meeting you here in my home kitchen, and we will talk about traditional cooking techniques, but my focus is specifically geared towards healing diets. Our family has been on the GAPS diet for over 4 years, for about 4.5 years. So GAPS is my greatest specialty, but I am a recipe consultant. I meet with clients referred to me by doctors and gastroenterologists who also do AIP or the paleo diet or any other healing protocols. So GAPS is my best, but I'm more than happy to be here. If you have questions on other subjects, I may or may not be able to help with those topics as well. Thank you so much for the hearts and for sharing. I really appreciate it. So glad to have you all here. Very heartwarming. So today we're going to be talking about Jun. And you may or may not be familiar with Jun. My husband and I own a traditional cafe in Eugene, Oregon, where we serve Jun. We only just started serving it recently. We've been serving kombucha on tap for the full time that we've owned the company, for about 5.5 years. And about 4 years ago, we went to a fermentation festival, and we were sharing gluten-free sourdough, and we had waffles with us, and we were showing people what starters looked like and talking about how to take care of them. And we were in our booth next to a Jun booth. And this, like I said, was 3 or 4 years ago. So excited to have you, Emily. Recipes to Nourish. Karen, hello. We were next to this booth, and at that time, even kombucha was still a buzz. I mean, even now it's a buzz, and it should be. But you can imagine that Jun was even more new 4 years ago. So this company was the first company to have Jun in Eugene, but even in the United States, there was very little Jun, and most people had never heard of it. Even now, of course, it's quite new. Well, they had this one Scobie that they had brought over from China, and they were, of course, unwilling to share it because they kind of had a corner on the market and didn't want other people selling Jun as well. So we tasted it and we loved it. And what made it extra special for us was that we were on the GAPS diet, so we couldn't have sugar. So a lot of people are surprised that we can't have kombucha. Like, who can't have kombucha? But even though the fermentation consumes a lot of the sugar, it doesn't consume all of the sugar. So it isn't GAPS friendly for folks who can only have honey as a sweetener. And so recently, I would say in the last 1.5 years, Jun has become more popular, more common, and now anybody in the States can acquire a Jun Scobie, whereas before they were very elite. Speaking of the elitist aspect of Jun, it is a really interesting sort of culture surrounding this form of fermentation. It originated as early as 600 BC in ancient China. There's a lot of mysticism and rumors surrounding Jun, and a lot of elitism. So some people will really surround Jun with a certain spirituality, and the monastic monks of Tibet and China are the ones that originally made it, and then it purportedly gives the body energy and increases circulation, so it was even used in the military. And so I think there's this sort of snobbery around Jun that the common person perhaps should not be able to access it. And of course, I feel just the opposite. I feel like Jun should be for the masses, of course, because essentially it's healing waters. It's for all of us. It's for those of us who are unwell, those of us who are well. It's infusing the body with the same probiotics that kombucha does, but it's made with green tea and honey instead of black tea and sugar. So it's gentler on the digestion. It's not going to feed candida overgrowth. Hello, welcome. I'm sorry I'm not commenting as much as I should. I'm just so grateful to have you all here. Yeah, Russia, kombucha goes back to Russia, yes. And Jun to China. As far as I know, Jun only to Asia originally. So anyways, so now Jun Scobies are accessible. And we got ours from one of the only Jun manufacturers in Eugene. There are two. One of them is considered, I think, even worldwide to be like the most elite maker of Jun. Let me see. You know, that's a great question. The question is, do I think that a regular Scobie can be converted to a Jun Scobie? It would never become a Jun Scobie, but it could adapt to honey. My dear friend Wardy from Traditional Cooking School has done that with a kombucha Scobie successfully. So I certainly think it's worth a try, and some of the conditions surrounding how you create the fermentation would affect that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute, just how we can give our fermented beverages some added advantages. So I think it's worth a try. It wouldn't technically be Jun, but it would still be a fermented beverage, or it would be kombucha really, but made with honey. And again, that snobby Jun folks would definitely not call it Jun. They're very picky. Even having my Scobie here with raw Willamette Valley honey in it, exposed to the living yeasts and bacteria that are above this crock, that are Oregon yeasts and bacteria, make the most elite Jun snobs, no offense to them, not approve it as pure Jun. So they feel like it has to be completely isolated with, the air and everything that comes from China. And of course, I guess you could argue that, but I love the fact that I've got the Oregon yeasts and bacteria going on and interacting with my Jun Scobie, because I live in the Willamette Valley and I want to, be blessed by the yeasts and bacteria here, as far as, how it improves allergies and other things like that. There was one question I missed. Thank you. There was one question I missed. If you want to type it in again, please do, and I'll try to be more attentive to reading those. Thank you. So the other Jun manufacturer here in Eugene was creating Jun for our company, Vanilla Jill's, in Eugene, and he was bottling it and giving it to us in kegs. He went out of business because it is just really hard to be a restaurateur or to create food products. His product was our favorite as far as the flavor and the intensity of the probiotics. But it's just hard. It's hard to earn a living. And when he went out of business, he was quite good friends with my husband, or is, and he gifted us with his Jun Scobie. So up until that point, we actually never did kombucha at our home because of our cafe. We had a ton of kombucha free on tap, several varieties at all times at our cafe. So my husband was just drinking that, and the kids and I couldn't have it because of the sugar. So we just hadn't ever even made kombucha. But we were given the Jun Scobie, and it's just been a completely magical experience since that point. I feel so thankful and excited. It's something I never even thought to ask for or want. Can a Scobie be created, or does one have to be acquired? So when you do create Jun, it wouldn't be called kombucha, it would just be called Jun. And yes, you can acquire one through Kombucha Camp, and that's with 2 Ks, kombucha with a K and then camp with a K. Online you can order Jun Scobies. So I'm very glad you asked that. It's an important point that now Jun Scobies are available to all. Actually, I think with them you start with something you'll sprinkle in that will, help inoculate, and then your Scobie will grow from that. But I was given the Scobie, so I actually want to show it to you today. It's a little unorthodox to lift it out of the crock, but I want to show you how I'm doing it because I think it's part of the success I'm having. Because I haven't had prior experience personally creating kombucha, I came at this as someone who had, thank you, who had just been around the kombucha culture but hadn't myself done it. And so I definitely entered into it with a dose of insecurity, hoping it would all go well. And Curtis, the man whose Jun Scobie was given to us, he gave my husband the recipe and how to create it. And then, I'd had this fermentation crock just sitting in my kitchen for like 2 years. It was this huge splurge that I'd used birthday money to buy. It's the kind of big crock that you make sauerkraut in, and you can pound directly into it, and then you press everything down beneath the salty brine and let it ferment. Well, there was too much aerobic activity going on because my crock is huge, and so I'd fill it halfway with sauerkraut, and then there's all this air between the kraut and the water and where the rag was, and I think that amount of aerobic activity was actually causing the comm yeast. So I think those kinds of crocks can be great, but for me, I failed. I wasn't making good sauerkraut in it, and so it was sitting on my counter, making me depressed because of my failure, and holding lids. Then I got the Scobie, and I was looking around for some big glass jar with a wide mouth, and I spotted the crock, and I was like, oh, why couldn't I do it in that? And so I did, and I've been doing that, and I didn't even realize until recently when I talked to one of the Jun specialists in Eugene. He told me that is the optimum choice for making Jun. He said Jun is actually more finicky than kombucha by a lot, and that people often don't succeed with it. And that's not to discourage you, because I'm doing fine and I'm a beginner. But he said he felt like my crock was a lot of the reason I was succeeding, and he said that was something he was actually saving up for. And he's a Jun guru. He makes all of his in glass jars. So he's saving up for a crock so he can be making it like this. So sometimes you just accidentally get lucky and happen upon a great fermentation technique that you never intended to. So I'm going to tilt this down. I have to say I ordered a little adjuster between my tripod and my phone, and it didn't get here by today, so I actually have my phone taped to my tripod. So if the phone falls, then that is Periscope for you, and this live presentation will be a little bit quirky. Okay, I'm tilting this down. Okay, this is my crock. I'm opening it, and oh my goodness, I so wish you could smell this. I am reaching my hands in. Now, there are 2 Scobies in here. Actually, I'm going to lift this back up because I think you're going to be able to see it even better because of the lighting if I show it to you right like this, lifted up by my face, okay? There are 2 Scobies in here. First, I'm going to show you my Scobie that's more common and maybe not as pretty, but it's quite big. Here's mine. Woo! You see how thick it is and everything? Okay. That's my Scobie. That's the one, I didn't even know it was going to happen, but I put Curtis's Scobie in, made gorgeous Jun, and then mine grew on top of his, so they're still separate. Now, of course, I could separate them and put one in the fridge or give one away, and I'm happy to do that. But for now, they're both in there, and I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to show you his beautiful. His jar was smaller, and the cool thing about his Scobie is that, okay, can you see this? It's really solid. It's just like a big chunk. It's not waffly on the edges or anything like mine. It's just thick and like a giant slimy pancake. It's absolutely gorgeous. And I put, this one is underneath. Mine grew on top of his. And he said when he gave it to Tim, my husband, that it was the most beautiful. Okay, you want one and you have extra? You bet. And I don't have a Scobie Hotel in the fridge. I want to tell you in a minute why I don't, and I'll get to that. Let me dry off my hands real quick. So he told Tim that was the most beautiful Jun Scobie he had ever seen. So I felt like a little nervous when he gave it to me, but also really privileged and excited. Yeah, slimy pancake. Okay, so the reason that I don't have a Jun Hotel in my fridge or anywhere else for that matter is that we're a family of 5, and I decided right from the beginning to do a continuous brew, which apparently is very controversial, especially with Jun, because it's more difficult. But I did it because it seemed like it was easier. And so that's kind of how we roll around here. You know, a lot of people say, like, how do you have a family of 5 on the GAPS diet? How do you never compromise? All these kinds of things. I do compromise. What I do is I compromise wherever I can, you know, grass-fed hot dogs, whatever. I mean, I do. That's how I make it, is I find little crutches here and there that make my life easier, that aren't genuine compromises, but that are conveniences. So for me, when I started Jun, it was like, either this thing is continuous brew or it's not happening at all, right? I mean, I just stuck that in the crock, and it was too heavy to stick in the fridge or pour out or do any of that transferring business. And this is how I make bone broth too. It's just got to keep going because our lives are busy and I don't have a lot of time to be dumping and pouring and transferring and all of that. So thank you guys, so kind. So anyway, so the continuous brew, all we do is I brew my green tea while it's still on the warmer side of hot. I add the honey. And then when it's room temperature, I pour it on top of the Scobie, or Scobies in my case. And so I let it get down kind of low, and that takes us about 5 days. My Jun is ready to drink at about 2.5 days, 2.5 to 3 days. You can start drinking the Jun. And then by day 3, it's like at its prime. You have a really effervescent drink. It's bubbly and delicious, and I get lovely squeaks out of my kids and Tim when they drink it. Yes, Jun does ferment in a similar temperature as kombucha, and you know there are exact specifications, and I can leave those in the notes. You'll be able to access this through, I'm gonna save it through Catch and get it on my YouTube channel. I think I'm still figuring all that out, but I'll make sure to put the specifications on temperatures in those notes. But pretty much, I mean, an average household temperature, you can have a little variation. It's something like 66 to 74 degrees is fine. And if anyone wants to correct me and type that into the notes, please feel free to do that. But that's about the spectrum. And the crock actually is more forgiving. If you've got the crock, you know, the walls on this thing are 3/4 of an inch thick all the way around. And so I think it really holds the temperature beautifully. Great question, Karen. Does it become alcoholic as kombucha does? It is more alcoholic. So Jun is about 2% alcohol, whereas kombucha is about 0.5%. And this is interesting because not everybody is willing to give it to their kids. I never researched it, honestly. I just started giving it to them, and they were never tipsy, right? And I figure it's just an excellent source of probiotics. My kids are always thirsty at dinner, but I didn't want to give them water because it can dilute the stomach pH, and that's really important. So for us personally, we are okay. We have never seen, the kids have never acted like they felt dizzy. They've never, you know, they're so self-aware because of our lifestyle and our healing diet. Hello from Germany. Wonderful. It says GAPS doesn't allow alcohol though. Okay, so maybe to some small extent GAPS does, in the sense that what kind of alcohol is it? And she goes into more detail in the book about this. There are some alcohols that are allowed. So like tequila is okay, vodka is okay. Thank you, Emily. Recipes to Nourish. There are certain kinds of alcohols in very small amounts, and certainly that would be true of, like, you know, all the bitters and things we take. These are in an alcohol base. So a small amount of alcohol is okay. And I personally, as a mama, my kids are 6, 12, and 14, and they drink about 6 ounces of Jun a day. So we have it with 1 meal a day, sometimes 2, usually 1, and then we do, like, you know, fermented veggies or homemade yogurt or whatever for the other meals. We try to have fermented foods with every meal. So let's see. So we talked about temperature, the continuous brew, I guess, just to finish up on that. Yes, kvass, wonderful, and we were fine. I agree. I think just that teeny bit of alcohol. So yes, so to each his own. I think some people may not feel comfortable with it. For us, we do, but you know, to each his own. If someone does not feel comfortable with the amount of alcohol in Jun, then it may not be a good fit for your family. The reason I love it is it does feel GAPS friendly to us, being sweetened only with honey, and to us, just, you know, that teeny bit of alcohol. So anyways, the continuous brew, day 3, it's at its prime, and it's very effervescent, and then by day 5, it's starting to get vinegary. So your optimum pH for kombucha or Jun is about 3. And when it drops down to, and 3.1 is okay too. When it drops down, okay, Karen says, but no sugar, so that's good for GAPS. Gotcha. Yes, exactly. When it drops down to 2.8 pH, then you're getting into a more vinegary world. That's not as ideal for the Jun. And so then it's time. Yes, yes, and I will get to that in just a minute. Can you flavor it similarly as kombucha? Yes, you can. So when it drops down to 2.8, then you've got your vinegary stuff starting to happen. That's kind of the time to save your Jun and add more fresh tea and more honey, because if you don't, it will kind of enter into a vinegary world that it's hard to ever get it out of again. So like I said, I just keep doing that. By the 5th day, I add more tea and more honey, and I have never had to refrigerate ours ever. You certainly could refrigerate it if you prefer to drink it cold. You could ladle some out or do whatever is convenient. I have this really cool ladle that my hubby made me. It's wood, and so I try to not put metal in there, as that can kind of kill some of what the good fermentation that's going on. As far as flavoring Jun, it behaves just like kombucha. You can certainly put in fruit, dried fruit, ginger. What's the biggest mistake you ever made? That's cute. I haven't been making Jun long enough to make a big mistake, and I've been very fortunate. Yes, he's a keeper. I know, right? I have this crock, and I think that has probably protected me and helped me from making more mistakes with my Jun, because like I said, I just jump in with both feet for what's convenient, and I've gotten lucky with starting out with a really good Scobie and having the crock. So yeah, and then other than that, it really does follow the normal rules of kombucha as far as, you know, bottling it or flavoring it. Oh, lovely, Karen. Lovely. Reminds her of a ladle that her grandfather made in Korea.